everyone for coming and listening to us. I know it's quite late on the second day of this event, so I appreciate anyone's time who's managed to come out and see this panel this afternoon. My name is Georgia Halston. I am the founder and CEO of Halston Group, and I'm here under the guise of Sustainability Partnerships, which is our business that links sustainable companies with decision makers within the NHS. So I've been happily asked to come and chair this panel today, the path to truly sustainable data centres. So in this panel we're going to discover how healthcare organisations can respond to the current energy crisis while also future-proofing by creating data centres that enable high-quality care while also managing the threat caused by the rising power costs and the need to operate sustainably. So that's a bit of a mouthful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to defer initially to John to give us a bit of a background of a history of immersion cooling and heat recapture. But I think if you don't mind, John, if you can just give us an introduction to who you are, what you do, what Carbon Z do, and then maybe go down the line and everyone can give an introduction to themselves as well.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is John Clark. I'm the Commercial Director for Carbon Z. We provide a sustainable data centre. We're also probably one of the first to start using and developing immersion technology in cooling. And one of the things we've now seen moving forward is how we can actually do heat recapture and actually from a micro data centre actually spin up on sites to like a hospital and provide hot water and heating, and that being powered by your servers and your IT load. And that's something we're keen to do because that's far more sustainable than the traditional model. So yeah.
Just introduce yourself, Paul, and tell us what you do at GRC.
Hi guys. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Paul Edmondson. I'm the Vice President of EMEA for Green Revolution Cooling. We make immersion cooling tanks, and working in partnership with our partners such as Carbon Z, we can actually create innovative solutions that add real value back to any end user, but obviously in this setting, the NHS specifically.
Awesome. Matt?
Thank you. Matt Jevons, I lead the advisory team for ProAct, and we're a partner of Carbon Z and GRC. And there's two aspects that are relevant here. The first is I lead the consulting team, so I'm really focused around modernisation, technology-founded modernisation, so platforms, interoperability, analytics, security, how you change your organisation. And in the background, ProAct has a set of services that are around managing operations and delivering that change. And that's where we partner with Carbon Z and GRC to deliver that underneath because of the sustainability solutions that they have.
Good afternoon. My name is Darius Varabi. I'm the head of healthcare at ProAct, and it's my role to try and accelerate some of the digital maturity, digital strategy with our NHS customers. We work with over 75 individual NHS trusts and organisations across the UK, providing infrastructure, managed services, and obviously at the moment with a keen interest and a key eye on board agendas, the topics that are in discussion around sustainability and making sure that we're supporting NHS trusts getting to their carbon objectives of 2040.
Great, thank you. So, sorry, John, I know that I did ask you a question and then asked you to pass it on. So let's just lay the groundwork here a little bit. Why are we even talking about sustainability in terms of data centres? Because you and I have been around and people kind of think out of sight, out of mind, right? And it's not necessarily at the front of mind, even for people in tech, no. The carbon footprint of their data centres.
So it's a really interesting comment. So every 8 seconds, someone's touching a data center. So if you're on your phone right now, or you're surfing the internet, or your social media, or anything to do with work, emails, it's all touching a data center in the background. So that is one thing that we're really sort of keen from. I run a co-location space in the background, so I'm very familiar with how this infrastructure works. And one thing from a sustainability piece, we're all being very much conscious from the power side of how we can do things more efficiently with cooling. But there's also the other aspects as well, is actually how we're then using that heat and what's then that going to, because traditionally that heat is all just lost. And that's why us looking at immersion technology over the last couple of years, so we have investigated a number of different areas, be it water-based cooling, in-roads and rear doors, and all different types, and then come around to immersion. And we've found out from that technology how much it's growing, but also at the same time how much more greater deployments we can make with it. and how much more agile it can then be as a solution moving forward to different companies outside of what historically has been a huge mammoth data center sat out in the middle of nowhere that you guys would not probably even think about or even know about. So it's just how we can get that a bit more front of mind about how we can do things sustainably and more economically with that power, and that's so it's not being lost. So what I'm aiming to do is that we would have heat being generated by the servers, and that service then provides that heat to that building, which traditionally just be lost. And that's one of the key things we're just trying to drive. And the technology's been around for a long time. It was invented by Nikola Tesla. He discovered this by actually dropping a live diode into vodka. Don't recommend anyone doing this at home, please, or any children. But from that, it then developed out, and there's now lots of different products in the back of this that have now been developed. And we're working with a number of partners, including GRC, who are leading this way in the background. And it's a really interesting topic that we're sort of developing. But just to help out, it's been used in deep-sea submersive vehicles for years, just due to the pressure. It's also been looked at by IBM in the 1960s and just slowly been pushing out more and more. And I think with the cost of living crisis at the moment and the relevancy, it's now sort of like rearing its head as the best option going forward of how to do things sustainably. So, yeah.
Great, and I think that leads straight into some conversations that I've been having with you guys at PROACT today, and about where the sustainability point is on sort of boardroom agendas, whether that's public sector or private. And we were all sort of under the same opinion that actually it shouldn't be a point in itself. It should be integral to every single other point on that boardroom agenda. So I wanted to come to you guys and just ask a little bit about the pain points or the hurdles or the things that you know that are happening in healthcare and the NHS and sustainability today.
So I think, you know, from the front line and in a lot of the conversations that I have with NHS organisations, you know, typically within IT spheres, you know, they've got data centre footprints and they're using a lot of energy, and with pressure coming down from the board about how to reduce carbon footprint, about how to save money, you know, all of that kind of comes into the mix. You know, when we start to look at, you know, what we can do as an organisation in partnership with, you know, really innovative technology, it's really powerful, and a lot of, you know, there's a lot more interest in innovative ways to start to deal with these pressures, for, you know, from a governance perspective. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So building on what Darius has said there's three key challenges we see with organisations when they're trying to deal with this. The first is around building an effective model of what it is you're actually trying to do in the future. So John mentioned that this technology has been around for a long time at a data centre level. So if any of you in the audience are a data centre manager, you'll probably get this straight away. There's a need for change there and some big differences that can be made. But if you're not, and you're coming at it more from an exec level or a clinical level, this probably isn't well understood. And one of the problems I see time after time is this failure to build an effective model that goes across all the functional areas and all the component parts and pulls things together coherently, so that you're not just making a decision in one area or trying to make a justification in one area. You clearly understand how it ties through to the needs of the organisation. And importantly, you build something that's not just fit for now, but builds in the structural capacity to change over time as you're dealing with this, because that's key when you're trying to build at a systems level, which increasingly is what the NHS is trying to do around this. The second aspect that ties into this, again I see this time after time, is the ability, or indeed the inability, to step outside of entrenched thinking and entrenched ways of working, to actually challenge the course and direction and to actually seek a different path, because some of these things are well understood, but how do you change them? And we were talking earlier on about procurement and sourcing and some of the difficulties of tying that together in the overall model. The third aspect that holds these things back is around the inertia that's there from investments that have been made in the past, working practices from the past, approaches from the past, and technology investments from the past. And each of those can be dealt with. And across all of these three things, what we look for is where can you make incremental marginal gains to start the path of moving things forward, and where can you look for bigger picture changes over time in terms of dealing with it. So depending on your interest in the audience, if that perks your interest, come and have a chat with us on the stand, because we've got a whole host of content to help you can move that forward. It directly fits into the conversation around the technology at the data center level, because that's the fundamental enabler. Everything is built on those platforms, so the change that's going to come from technology is founded on what these guys do.
I think that's a great lead in for you, Paul, to just give us a little bit more insight, a little bit more background as to what GRC are doing, and also the sort of hurdles that you come up against. I've got a few here, things like people being concerned about what warranties there are, also about things like retrofitting. So do you want to just go in and cover any of them off?
Yep, by all means. So we're probably the most established immersion cooling vendor in the world. We've been going since 2009. Over that time period, we've built global alliances with the likes of Dell. So Dell remained to be our largest OEM partner worldwide. And through working in partnership and close partnership with Dell, we, through a specific conversion process of a standard server, Dell will honour the warranty, so you're still fully protected in your IT investment, even though you're actually putting a server into liquid, which seems a little bit alien maybe to most people, but actually Dell will protect that warranty, so you're insured for service coverage.
There was also the about retrofitting.
The retrofitting.
So can you put into any data center for any person, any size?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to come and have a look at our stand, it's F6 just down there. We've got our micro pod, it's our smallest unit, but our units are designed to either go straight onto a concrete floor. Most data centers have a false floor where you're running power, cooling, networking. We don't need that. We can stick it straight onto a concrete slab, but equally, the way that our products are designed, they will fit on a false floor. So you can literally put our tanks in any location, anywhere in the world.
What's some of the biggest data centers that you've had an implementation in? What kind of kilowatt hour are we talking in terms of power draw?
In terms of kilowatt hours, I'm unsure, but our biggest project at the moment we're working on is in India with an organisation called PhonePe. They're a payment processing agency, very similar to PayPal, where they're immersing 10,000 servers. So that's our largest scale deployment globally so far. So.
Amazing. And do you have any NHS or healthcare examples that you could talk about? Are you allowed to share information on?
Not in the UK. We are actively engaging with the NHS. We sit on a decarbonisation framework, which is direct award. We are the only immersion cooling vendor on that partnership agreement with you guys, and we have the ability to subcontract, so we can work with our partners like Carbon Z, so the innovation that they're doing around heat recapture, heat reuse, to provide central heating or water back into the NHS as a byproduct is, again, can be contracted for us on the direct award framework.
So talking about what you do, John, I wondered, is there any real hurdles that you come up against? I know you and I were talking about old school way of doing things, on-prem servers and things from the past. And I wondered, what do you come up against? Is there still a fear of working with a company like yours?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of nervousness because I think a lot of the IT managers we speak to have never seen the technology being deployed safely before. So we are one of the first in the UK that have got a site up and running. We can actually invite you guys to come down and see what we're doing and how we're deploying it. But it makes it really interesting because if you turn around to someone and say, yes, I'm going to sink a server into an immersion bath, and by the way, it looks like water, it's not. But
what is it? What exactly is the liquid?
So it's actually a dielectric fluid. So it's actually a fluorinated product. So we have to be very careful with actually how we maintain and manage it. But it's, for example, the boiling point is about 170 degrees. The operations would be looking to run this between 45 to 65 degrees Celsius, which makes it a viable heat source. But what's interesting is we have to then monitor this in the background. But all the chipsets we've seen so far, so along with working with GRC, we've also been working alongside with Dell, Intel and AMD to understand their chipsets and where they're looking to come to the market. So that's what makes it really interesting for us, because as of Q4 now and Q1 and Q2 next year, they're going to be a big release of actual server readies. So I think that's historically been a bit of a blocker because customers and IT managers haven't known where to procure their servers from, and then there's been a bit of a question mark, which Paul's now answered regarding the warranties, because they're now also endorsing the product further, because they're now seeing this as a big step forward. So that's been some of the challenges historically on this, and it's also a case of there hasn't been the commercial sites to also deploy it as well. So that's why we're sort of like championing this and also saying, look, we've got a site, To be clear, we also do have dry racks in the background, so we can help migrate across. So if you are worried, we can still show you what a dry rack looks like in comparison to immersion. But it's a really big sort of game changer, because the deployment you can get in immersion, you're looking at one full rack in immersion, you're probably looking at the same as like sort of 30 to like almost 100 racks, depending on the server configuration, in comparison to dry air. So you get savings as well of OPEX and CAPEX, which is what initially drove our interest into this, because you're then seeing 30 to 40% savings across both of those pieces, and that's not tying in the heat recapture yet. So yeah.
So basically just come down and see Carbon Z, right? Come and look at the facility.
Yeah,
if you don't believe us, come and have a look.
If you don't believe us, come down and look.
Have a tour.
We've got 6 houses worth of electricity into immersion bath. It's 50 kilowatts. You won't lose your hair. I promise. My engineer probably has got no hair, but that's not a reflection of the fact that he had due to that process. But it is really, really safe. You can see what we're doing and come and understand a bit more about us. So yeah.
Awesome. So we did talk a little bit there about CAPEX versus OPEX. Did any one of you guys wanted to jump in on that as well? Do you want to start, Paul, and give your angle on that piece as well?
So our view of the world is that when you immerse a server, typically an end-user organisation will save at least 50% of their operating cost for running that server. As John has mentioned, we're not dipping servers into water, we're dipping them into dielectric fluid, and scientifically proven dielectric fluid is 1,200% more efficient at cooling a server, so therefore that needs less air handlers, less crack units that you typically find within a data center. Also, as John has mentioned, Intel, AMD are bringing out the latest and greatest CPUs, which are generating more heat. It becomes harder for you to cool in a traditional data center. Therefore, your cost to cool will increase exponentially. That's why now immersion is becoming now the new standard.
The new standard. That sounds like it is a bright future.
You heard it here first.
Do you guys at Proact want to give us a little bit of insight on anything to do with cost savings or with the...
Yes, and in fact, so that conversation is just prompting a few thoughts in my mind around some bits that sort of tie on to this. You've got the aspects around sustainability, but the fact that the technologies put together can drive down and make a huge difference from the sustainability point of view. You can drive down what you're spending from a cost point of view. You've also got the fact that the technology you're putting in place reduces the number of moving parts and the complexity of the technology, so you actually improve the quality of service and resilience you can get from it. And the fact that you've got something that's self-contained that can be dropped in, it removes the potential need for a large-scale investment in data center technologies, which has a cost saving, but also has an agility benefit. It allows you to move more quickly. So where the right case is for you to have technology located locally, which might be around traditional uses and might be around edge cases or newer emerging technologies where you need to have it locally within the environment, it gives you a much speedier approach to actually getting that technology in place to a quality that you can guarantee that's above what you could get with traditional approaches, and it gives you that agility and pace to move that you can't possibly do with traditional data centers.
I'm going to ask about the agility piece, because I know that you and I, the three of us have been talking about that, and I wanted to pick that up with you anyway, Darius. And I just think that how are you guys educating from the very beginning of a digital transformation project to say sustainability should be at the very core of what you're doing, and it shouldn't be an afterthought. Let's bake that into our strategy from the start.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because if you consider how many NHS trusts there are, organisations there are in the country, there's say 300. Each of them are on a rolling 3 or 5 typically year capital investment plan to replace millions of pounds worth of technology that's sat holding patient records. So that's what between 50 and 100 organisations coming out each year to modernise their infrastructure to get more bang for their buck and actually start to deliver upon some of the clinical stuff, i.e. getting the right data in the right hands of the right people from a clinical perspective to better inform clinical decisions closer to the point of care. If, as you tie data centre modernisation in, you can bake into that sustainability, trying to attain better carbon figures, etc., you're going to automatically benefit from that. And then the broader and wider collaboration effect of multiple organisations locally and regionally clumping together to do this in one go can have a really big impact on the way that our taxpayer money is being spent on servicing and supporting the clinical services that we receive. You get all that right, and then the byproduct of all of that is better informed care that can be preventative in nature by giving people the right information at the right time. And you can start to move resources around and save people going through patient pathways or workflows because you've seen something earlier using analytics and some of the cool tool sets that are out there that can go into your data centers. So I take your point, it has to be baked in, it has to be considered, and board, from the top is really going to drive this with the regional and national agenda around 2040.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we started sustainability, or when sustainability partnerships first started, we worked with an NHS that didn't even have a greener NHS, right? They didn't have sustainability managers within each trust. It was an afterthought. And we started initially talking about things like offsetting. It's like, okay, so this is our carbon footprint. How many trees can we plant to offset our how many seagrass projects can we look at to offset? And then we're like, well, wait a minute, why don't we just start creating efficiencies in places like data centers? And then it's like, well, wait a minute, why don't we just stop producing so much data? Why don't we just stop being a little bit more agile in the way that we look at the way that data is used and stored and duplicated and all that kind of stuff? So I just wanted to have some of your guys' thoughts on, hey, let's look at the source of where the carbon footprint is actually being used, as opposed to thinking, oh, we'll use all of this carbon footprint and let's just offset it and everything will be okay. So how we can be agile from the very beginning. I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on that point at all.
From my understanding, data is a really, really complex attitude, because I think most companies are now trying to actually grow their data sets and actually understand it and do a lot more analytical pieces with it. But then comes that intelligent piece of actually how valued is that data once it's being created. If you're only touching it once or twice, but it's then sitting there, and this is very relevant to the healthcare industry, whereby you have to replicate whatever data sets you've done, and in some of those cases you have to keep them in perpetuity. It becomes a very different state. So it's almost like your data you're creating, you have to manage really carefully. So I think from a personal case, it's a case of if you can clean up your Gmail, how much stuff you got, your Google Drives or Disney or whatever you're not using, I'd recommend everyone does that once a month, and that will have a huge impact. But from a business perspective and from a healthcare perspective, you've got to think you've got a lot of data being driven by you. Data is becoming a more and more valuable commodity, so it's how you look at that and what you're creating. Is that going to keep driving you value for your, and what value is that then creating for you? That's the key things you just need to understand. So yeah.
Paul, did you have any comments on that?
No,
that's fine.
So just picking up on that point around data, I think the way I tend to think about this and help explain to people is think of it as a set of building blocks, and you want each of those building blocks to fit together correctly. So data centers and the technology that sits inside them is right at the foundation of this, and then you layer the other elements on top. And at each layer you're looking at what can you do from a sustainability point of view and how does it fit together. So we've talked about data centers in quite some depth there. John's mentioned data. The key thing as you start going up the stack is to start looking at your applications and your services, how well architected they are, how they're put together, should they still exist at all, can they be done differently? And the technology code of practice really helps here. There's a lot in there that really helps drive things from a sustainability point of view. Going up a bit further again, you get into data, and this is a huge challenge, not just in the NHS, but across organisations, in terms of the volume of data that already exists and the volume of data that's created on a daily basis. And this isn't staying the same, this is increasing continually. So if you look at imaging and what's created from an imaging point of view, you continually need to be looking at and challenging the value you're getting from your data, but not just on how you've worked in the past, how you might potentially want to work in the future. Question whether it should be retained, look at innovative ways of retaining it over time if you need to keep it, delete it if you don't, and that's easier said than done in terms of dealing with it. And when you're looking at newer technologies and doing newer things, so imaging and artificial intelligence, look at the right ways of dealing with that. What size image should you be capturing? What's the size you need for your organisation? Don't create anything bigger, because when you look at this on the aggregate, it makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference down at the data centre level in terms of storing it. So when you're looking at sustainability systemically, you've got to pull all these things together because they're integrated. And that goes back to the point I made about an integrating model for dealing with this. To get this working the right way coherently, you need to pull everything together.
And I think there are becoming like a lot more standards around data, aren't there? So not just around crap data sets that you don't need and you're just storing for no reason, but also around the interoperability of your tech, right? So you need to make sure, if you're working with NHS, that you've got some open APIs, because if you can't share the data that you've got with other platforms in other trusts, and everything, like you say, siloed away, that we can't work that way, the way that the NHS is structured right now. So there's things like the FHIR regulation around how people are now sharing the data and the insight that they're producing through their platforms. So it's nice to see that it's not so much of a Wild West anymore, and when you're working with something like the NHS, there are going to be more regulations around how you deal with data, how you store it, and how sustainable it's going to be. Coming on to that, obviously, net zero 2040 is the big goal for NHS. We're looking to be the first healthcare system in the world that is net zero. So it's a massive goal. It's a big hill to climb. So I just wanted some last words from each of you of how what you're doing and what you think will be some low-hanging fruit, some easy wins, something that the healthcare system can do now to really get us on our way to that net zero future.
I think regardless of, I think there's a couple of really quick wins you can make in the background. Some of those are just checking your current data centres. If you're currently in contract with them, are they using sustainable energy? Are they using green platforms? What are they looking to do to change that model? If they're not, you can make a quick win by changing a data centre if possible. But then going forward, what I'd suggest that companies do is then actually look at, from a wider piece, from an ESG perspective, is a case of just looking at how you are continuing to invest in that model, what you're looking to do from environmental sustainability. But the data, you can make some other quick wins by, if you've got on-site premises where you can look to maximise that and put it into immersion, the heat capture, that's carbon capture straight away. So there's a really quick win there if you want to go down that route. So it just comes down to the need and the drive, really. So, yeah.
From my perspective, if you look at all of the leading IT vendors, Dell, HPE, Cisco, they're all investing into sustainability. Their marketing position is changing. Everything is green. Circular economy is a new phrase that seems to be the buzzword of the day. So they're looking. So I would encourage you to, if you're working with Dell or you're working with HPE, ask them about their sustainability credentials. It has to start from somewhere, and procurement can have a part to play in that role by asking, when you're buying your technology, how green are you? What are your manufacturing processes? Because if you put green in to your data center, that's ultimately going to help you with your net zero goals. So that's for me. So.
I think regardless of whether or not you end up talking to any of the three of us that are on stage here, if there's a traditional data centre in your organisation, that I can pretty much categorically say it will not drive you towards getting your optimal result from a sustainability point of view. It will be a sunk cost investment from some time ago, and it will not be able to keep pace with the pace of the marketplace and dealing with it. So what you want to be looking for is how do you embed some kind of flexibility in terms of the shift there. Tied in with that in terms of what I've already spoken around operating models and where you head, start thinking about what can you do beyond your organisational boundaries. So here you start talking at a system level, so an integrated care world, but not just in terms of the care side of things, but in terms of technology provision, because the more you can get to a shared environment where you're optimising the use of resources, the more you'll head towards those sustainability goals.
I think some of the work that we're doing with a number of NHS trusts is about lifting the bonnet and seeing what data there is in those data centres. To John's point, let's all do a sweep of our email folders, but I wonder how many personal images, personal credit card details, and many, many more are sat on NHS servers being kept for 10 years because somebody left and they thought that it was important to the NHS trust. So there's a lot of kind of visibility that needs to be done, and once you can understand what data is sat on your platform, you can start to do more with it. You can start to interrogate it, you can start to analyze it, and in turn you will have to modernize. In turn you will have to invest in new innovative ways of being sustainable from a data center perspective, and in turn we can all start building a digital foundation for the NHS.
So a bit of spring cleaning is your first point of call.
Don't tell the wife I said that.
I think data cleaning is a lot easier than getting the top shelves in the kitchen. Okay, I think we're a bit out of time now, so thanks very much to my panel. If you want to speak about Carbon Z, please come and speak to John. What's your stand number again? 26? F6, just down the corridor here. Come and speak to Paul, and come and speak to both Matt and Darius about Proact. We're all together in one little band on the same stand, so come and have a speak to all of us. We can talk about potentially looking at the sustainable future for our healthcare system in the UK. Thank you.